There is a decline in adult friendships in the modern day. While they aren't totally non-existent, I can say that a majority of people can claim that they have little to no very close, intimate friends. And for those of us who do have friendships that we value, a lot of us can say that our friends do not live in the same city as us. If you just type it in on YouTube, I have no friends, there's a bunch of people who are going to pop up talking about their experience with a lack of friendship. There's mad people saying that they have no friends. So basically, I would say that technically speaking, we're in a friendship recession. Hell, I just saw a couple days ago, the Surgeon General issued a warning about the health risks that are associated with loneliness. The loneliness epidemic seems to be spreading amongst a lot of people around the world, and I think that a huge portion of that loneliness epidemic can be attributed to the friendship recession. When the US Surgeon General is talking about trying to implement new ways to socialize people again because loneliness is at an all-time high, I think we need to take this a little bit more seriously. But speaking of the friendship recession, what factors lead to the friendship recession? I think the problem with seeking friendships in the modern day is adjacent to the problem with dating and relationships in the modern day. And that main problem really boils down to one huge thing. It's the fact that there's a bunch of really shitty people out there. You know how there's that huge gender war happening where there's a bunch of men saying that women are toxic, there's a bunch of women saying that men are toxic? Well, honestly speaking, both of them are correct. Why? Because people ain't shit. There are a bunch of toxic people in general, male or female. Your gender does not automatically disclose whether or not you're going to be an asshole. There are shitty people on both sides of the spectrum. And if we can talk about how there are people who are too shitty to date, there are people who are too shitty to be friends with as well. There's a lot of people who are totally jaded because of experiences they had with friendships that they've made or people that they've let into their lives who turned out to be really bad people. People that I commonly like to refer to as the Always Sunny in Philadelphia people. People that are not good to be around. People who gossip behind your back. People who might steal from you. People who are very selfish and think of themselves as the main character and that you're like a side character and they don't treat you with respect or equal value. There's people who never pay you back. There's people who are constantly asking for favors and develop friendships literally just to have someone do favors for them, not because they actually want a friend. There's liars, there's manipulators, there's people with bad mood swings, there's people who cannot take the fact that you don't have all the time in the world to spend with them. There are people who do not respect your boundaries and demand way more from you than you're willing to give. There's some people who cannot acknowledge the fact that you have a life outside of them. And the list goes on. But in all seriousness, I really think as a society, we rarely talk about the fact that there are a lot of people who are walking red flags, and that is not just exclusive to dating. There are people who show you signs early on in acquaintanceship or friendship that they are not a good person. And just because you're not trying to get into a relationship with them, doesn't make them any less of a person that you shouldn't be spending time around. Sometimes we really need to just sit back, connect the dots, and realize that somebody is a shitty person. The last thing that you want is for someone to have the ability to ruin your life because you became friends with them. You don't want to be with anybody that's going to put you through any troubles, any drama, any hardship. You want to be friends with good people. Because of that very fact, there are a lot of people who are absolutely terrified at the thought of trying to make friends in the city that they live in. Can you imagine becoming friends with a psycho and now they know where you live? It's genuinely a scary thought. People are crazy these days. I know that it's a bit sensationalized, but there are plenty of stories that keep on coming out of people getting stalked, people getting murdered, people getting scammed by people that they've become friends with. I feel a lot of people just don't want to become another number in that statistic. But we also must ask the question, how did we make friends before? Why did it seem so easy at some point to develop bonds with a complete stranger? Well, truthfully, I believe it all has to do with the way that we were socialized. I'd say the staggering majority of us have gone through the schooling system. And when you go to school, you do eventually end up meeting a couple people that you would call your friends. The schooling system starts off pretty early on in life. By the time you're about 4 or 5 or 6, you're gonna be at least in pre-K. And within your first day to your first week, you meet a couple people that you're gonna call your friends. But at that point in life, you don't have that big of a definition of who you consider yourself to be or what you represent. It's really easy to bond with somebody when your main points of contention are about dino nuggets and how cool the green Power Ranger was. But I digress. In each installment of schooling, from pre-K all the way to getting a master's, you're eventually gonna run into a couple people within that proximity that you're going to consider to be your friend. There's always at least one person in that class that you're gonna find some kind of similarity with, and you're gonna pair up, and you're going to be friends with this person. But the older you get, the more nuanced the friendships become. No matter how great of a friendship or relationship you may have cultivated with this person over the span of some years, there's still one factor that's most important in determining whether or not you would actually be friends. And that factor is proximity. You both just happen to be victims of circumstance who were brought to the same location at the same time. By being placed into the same physical location in the same time and space, in the space-time continuum, this is what has caused for you to even have the ability to form a friendship in the first place. It's not to say that friendships are not made outside of proximity. It's to say that a majority of friendships have been made initially through proximity. Now, once you met at school, you more than likely bonded over some sort of connection that you shared with the person. You like the same anime, you have the same amount of siblings, you dislike the same teacher, you like watching the same TV shows on the same channel. There was always some sort of reasoning or agreement or some sort of bond that you shared that allowed you to connect with this person and call them your friend. But that comes secondarily. Proximity was the first measure in determining whether or not you would even be able to meet this person in the first place. You would never be friends with them if you did not meet them at that place at that time. Technically speaking, school is just one setting in which this type of thing happens. Proximity-based friendships occur in all sorts of places. If you ever had an internship or you had to do community service or some sort of volunteering, then you know exactly what I mean by this. Sometimes you do these activities for just one day, but I promise you, you made at least one friend during that day, even if it was just for the day. Sometimes it's at a summer camp. Some kids join a sport. Sometimes it has to do with after-school activities or some kind of club like debate team. Essentially, this happens in any setting where groups of people have come together for one sole reason that they share. Naturally, life is full of experiences that you're going to have, whether voluntary or involuntary. You're going to be going through experiences. And if you're going to go through them in groups of people, it's totally natural for you to want to choose somebody in the group of people that you're with to experience the experience with. Proximity rules this arena. You're always naturally going to gravitate towards trying to become friends with somebody who's close to you. Long distance relationships and friendships do work from time to time, but it's so much more common for people to maintain a healthy type of relationship with someone else when they can meet face to face on a regular basis. And because of this process of getting used to picking people to become your friend based on proximity, we kind of get used to this cycle and we think that life is going to be this way forever. It's very easy for one to come to the conclusion that they're always going to make friendships this way. That there's always randomly going to be some person within the vicinity that you share some kind of commonality with that you'll be able to pair up with in every event. But as we get older, we also get more choosy. Just because you have the option to hang out with someone doesn't make them a good option. And just because somebody wants to hang out with you doesn't necessarily mean you want to hang out with them. But adding another layer of difficulty to it, we now have to think about the place in which we spend a majority of our time in our adult lives. Most of us work. Most of us work at least 40 hours per week in order to put food on the table and keep our bills paid. And since most people spend a majority of their time at work, what's the deal with making work friendships? It's a very nuanced conversation. There's a lot of mixed feelings towards how people feel about befriending someone that they work with. In some cases, it's generally frowned upon to be trying to make acquaintances in a professional setting. Some people play it safe and they try not to get too close to the people that they work with. And understandably so. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, "don't shit where you eat." Considering that this is your livelihood and this is how you pay your bills and how you survive, some people don't want to play with fire. Let's say you become cool with somebody at work, but then you have a falling out. Now you gotta work with your enemy. There's all sorts of workplace drama that could ensue by building a relationship in the first place with somebody that you work with. But then there's the other side of the spectrum. There are some people who have made their greatest relationships and friendships with people that they've met at work. There's people who've created lifelong friendships with coworkers. There's people who've dated and married coworkers. There's people who've gone to each other's baby showers and all kinds of events. There's people who've gone to funerals. There are people who get really close based on meeting someone in a professional setting. And I think that that's really genuinely great when that does happen on the right way. There really are some relationships that people have fostered with coworkers that have been positive in their lives. My advice, generally speaking, for most people would be to be cautious in regards to becoming friends with somebody at work. I'm not saying don't be friends with people at work. I'm saying be cautious of the fact that you're taking a risk every time you do try to befriend a coworker. At the end of the day, we're all adults here. It is work. It's not technically supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be the place that you go and find your bestest friend. It's supposed to be the place that you go to broaden your career, pay your bills, make some money, and, just genuinely become somebody who's a productive member of society. If you make some friends in that process, that's awesome. I'm glad for you. But that's not really the main reasoning to go to work. And just like how I mentioned earlier that there are crazy, terrible people out there, there are some crazy, terrible people that you work with and you just don't know that they're crazy and terrible yet. If you become friends with them, you might unleash that side of them, and you may not want that in your life. Just don't make any dumb decisions haphazardly getting into friendships with people outside of work. You never know, your coworker could be a really bad person. However, your coworker could also be your future best friend. Just use your brain, exercise caution, be careful, and really think about it before you try to do this. But if you're not going to be trying to make friends with people in the place that you spend the most of your time, where are you going to make friends as an adult? Where do you find friends? Is it just as simple as going to a yoga class or a pottery class or trying to take a spin class or, well, a class? Is the thought process of everybody congregating to learn something new the best way to make a friendship? Or can you just meet people anywhere? Is it kosher to walk up to a total stranger at the park and say, "Hey, how's it going?" Truthfully, I think it all depends on the person. Some people would love to be approached in the park by a stranger as long as that person approaching them was friendly. Some people would absolutely hate it and would be terrified at the thought of some random stranger coming up to them and talking to them unprompted. Do you really want to get the cops called on you because you wanted to say hi? And I think that that's a main fear that most people have. That saying hello to a stranger could end up becoming detrimental to you. And what about fake friendships? What about people who hang out together, but they're not really hanging out together? They're just spending time with one another collectively, just so they're not alone. Are they truly friends by definition, or are they really just a group of people who are trying to not be alone? There is such a thing as a superficial friendship where people just hang out and shoot the shit, but they're not really trying to get to know each other. These are not people who are having really deep conversations with each other. They're not asking each other about their fears or what kinds of dreams and goals they'd like to achieve in life. They're really people who kind of mill around and try to look cool. And with the advent of social media, a lot of people with these fake friendships are constantly flaunting the fact that they have people to hang around. So when we see people posting, it seems like they have an infinite amount of friends. But more than likely, they're just vacuous relationships with people who are just grouping together to not be alone. Although if most people in the group were honest, a majority of them are probably experiencing emotional loneliness. But how do you avoid making fake friends in the first place? How do you avoid meeting psychos? How do you avoid meeting those genuinely shitty people that you don't want to date and you also don't want to be friends with? Well, the same type of advice that you would give somebody looking for a life partner, I think you got to give that same type of advice to somebody looking for a friend. Make a list of criteria of the kinds of attributes that you would look for in a person that you want to hang out with. And then don't hang out with people who do not fit that criteria. You want to meet somebody who's funny, kind, adventurous, someone who's caring, someone who's genuinely fun to be around, someone reliable, someone professional, someone that you can depend on. It's very common for us to think about romantic relationships as searching for one person that we're going to pair up with, and that person is going to help lead us to victory. Well, I think we need to start looking at friendships the same way. You need to prioritize teaming up with people that you think are going to help lead you to victory. Form your tribe. Form groups of people that you think are going to help your trajectory of life. But speaking of romantic relationships, I do have to talk about their impact on the friendship recession as well. Due to the nature of relationships and marriages, a majority of people tend to start pairing off at the end of high school or around that college age. And once they do decide to pair up, their network slowly begins to dwindle. They naturally begin to start spending a majority of their time with their significant other. The amount of time that they used to have to be able to spend with friends gets cut in half. And as the relationships get deeper, more priorities get piled on the plate. Once career and bills and children and mortgages and car notes and personal priorities start coming into the mix, you start to realize that there are more things important than just shooting the shit. Relocation is a huge factor in regards to dwindling relationships. Some couples decide to move to where one of their families are to establish a safety net, and rightfully so. Oftentimes people move across country for a career advancement or opportunity. Sometimes that career could even take them internationally. The older we get, the more we naturally tend to separate in this way. It's bittersweet, but most of us tend to find our footing in different arenas. When I think about my best friends, my closest people to me, we are all separated somewhere completely different from each other. I got a buddy in the Navy who's out in Japan with his wife and daughter. I got another buddy who's in Korea teaching English. One of my closest homies is in Las Vegas and his fiance is from Maui, so sometimes they go back and forth to Maui just to check out her family. I got a homegirl who's also in Korea. I got a homegirl in Portland, Oregon. I got a homegirl in Brooklyn. Long story short, I got a lot of people who are close to me that are completely separated from me. Now I would love to imagine some universe where we all move together to the same place. We live in the same neighborhood, we get into zany adventures all the time, and it's a wonderful life until we die. But unlike our favorite TV shows and sitcoms, life is just not wrapped up in a neat little bow that way. Truthfully, everyone's got their hustle, and they gotta go out and do the best that they can, wherever they can, to get what they can get out of life. And most times, that means that you're gonna have to spread out. You gotta go to the place that motivates you to become the best version of yourself. And that very well may not be the same place that your friend is located in. You may not have the same luck in career advancement or trajectory in the same place that your friend gets career advancement. You may not have the same romantic options in the place that your friend went to. You might hate the weather of the place that your friend went to. But at the end of the day, you have to separate and your friends have to separate. Everyone has to go where it's gonna work for them. What, you're gonna tell one of your best friends to not take their dream job in Brooklyn because you wanna sit around and drink chai teas with them and watch reruns of Seinfeld? No, that would make you a bad friend. And it would make them a bad friend if they told you to stick around instead of following your dreams. We have to mature and face reality. It is okay and natural for people to separate as they get older. But if you wanna truly maintain your friendship, just put effort into it. You don't have to lose your friendship because somebody decided to move away. You can visit them. They can visit you. You can always stay in communication. However, I digress. The separation gap gets wider and wider the older we get and the more involved we get with other people. By the time that people get to that middle age or senior citizen age, a lot of people claim to have no friends. Zero, goose egg. No one to depend on, no one to vent to, no one to understand you, no one to play video games with, no one to go out to the movies with, just that person that you chose as your partner. The only other person that they have in their life is their romantic partner that they chose. And if they just so happen to be unlucky and have picked a bad partner, then they really got a raw deal. They're just stressed out and stuck in a relationship with an unfriendly person. This will make someone feel more emotionally lonely than ever, let alone if this person has extremely negative attributes. What if they're a liar? What if they're a cheater? What if they're controlling? What if they're emotionally manipulative? What if they're physically abusive? What if they're condescending and they have a bad, nasty attitude all the time? What if they're constantly having mood swings? Long story short, there's a lot of people who end up in relationships with shitty people, and that ends up being the only person they communicate with on a regular basis. And if you do end up going through divorce, you end up going through hell and high water for years with this person, only to end up worse on the other side of it. You come out in such a worse spot than you began. You now have emotional baggage. You might have financial baggage. You might have a child. You would have all these battle scars that you take with you from this relationship that you endured. And in the event that you did form some sort of interconnected friendship based on affiliation with that partner, you now have people who are going to choose their side over your side. If you break up or divorce, the friendships are now fractured and people are going to choose sides. And most times, even if the person is in the wrong, if those friends had prior loyalty to them, usually they'll stay with that other person. On the flip side of that coin, there are people who desperately try to not get into any relationships because they want to avoid that at all costs. And understandably so. Why would anyone subject themselves to a slow torture like that? They could just be alone instead. Better to be alone than be in a toxic relationship. But at the end of the day, they're still alone. They're still lonely. They're still contributing to the loneliness epidemic. They're still a part of the friendship recession. There's a large portion of people across the globe who never got married and they never had children, and they feel as if they've done themselves a disservice. They feel like their life is empty and like it lacks meaning. They know that they don't have someone to help take care of them in their twilight years, be it a partner or children. They have no intimate memories that they share with a person over years and decades. All they have are the memories of whatever was good when it was good. And hopefully, if they played their cards right, a majority of the choices that they made in their life were actually good choices, so they did have a good time. But at the end of the day, they're still alone. They're still lonely. Now, this isn't to discourage marriage or to encourage somebody being single and forever alone. I just think that it's important to highlight both sides of either choosing a partner that's wrong or not choosing a partner and missing out on life. But I feel right now it's so much harder than ever to see the bright side of entering any sorts of relationships because of how many messed up people there are. There are so many broken people out there who are not aware of it and they need to fix it. There are so many people who need to heal that have no idea that they need to heal. And until they do, they are a threat to every single relationship that they could possibly form. And the unified fucked upness that we're experiencing is translating into toxic relationships. Look, I get it. Finding friendships right now in the modern day as an adult is difficult. There are so many factors that lead to this friendship recession that is allowing so many people to not have friends.
If I had one! Sorry.
And I do understand that a majority of us would like to have friendships. A majority of us would like to have people that we hang out with and do things with. But we want to trust these people. We want to vet these people and make sure that they're good for us and not bad for us. We want to meet people that we do have things in common with. We do want to meet people who are professional, people we might be able to network with, people we might be able to help get new jobs with. Personally, I believe that friends are so hard to come by in this day and age because we're so unique and individualistic. Each and every one of us are so divided these days because of our belief systems, our core values, the things that we like, the things that we dislike. we're very much sectioned off into an individualistic nature of who we decide that we want to be and what we represent and what we believe. And I feel that because they have their individualistic points of views, they're afraid of meeting up with people who are so far on the other end of the spectrum that they don't want to be getting in arguments all the time. Aside from that, you cannot dodge the fact that we're all perpetually busy. We all have to work and make a living. Unless you're a bum and a couch potato, most of us are working every day and trying to make a living at least 40 hours a week. Some of us have side hustles. Some of us have dreams and goals and aspirations and things that we want to achieve. Then there's people who like to exercise and fitness is a part of their regimen. Then there's diet and what you're going to eat today. There's so many different factors that contribute to you as an individual specifically that at some point it's kind of hard to even think about what you would do with another person. But aside from you as an individual, I also think the hard part about it is the fact of we don't know what we're getting when we're out there these days. I think we're all just afraid of being burned. I think we're all afraid of being lied to. We're all afraid of meeting somebody who's psycho. We're all afraid of just the possibilities of things going wrong when you try to make a friendship. I don't have the answers as to what is the perfect and best way to build relationships in the modern day, but I do know that it is difficult and a lot of people are desiring it. I just hope that collectively we all start thinking of some ways that we can start congregating and coming together and becoming friends with one another. This is my second installment in the mini-series of the loneliness epidemic. My next video is going to focus on digital relationships. Relationships built over text message, friendships built over digital platforms, parasocial relationships, and everything in between. Hope you enjoyed it. I really appreciate you if you watched this far, because realistically, you could be anywhere else in the world, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. Much love. Hope to see you in the next one. It's your boy Just Judah. Peace out.